G'day chaps, tis I, Clownpuncher139. Arkham is obviously my favorite series of all time. I'd wager it's the best licensed video game series of all time, and a large contribution to that fact is the incredible rogues gallery of bosses you face against. I may have already done a list a good 4 years ago, but that video was really bad, and I've changed my mind a bit. So, because I want to do things better than before, instead of just a countdown, I am ranking every single Arkham boss in one comprehensive list. Now, what I clarify as a boss can be a bit tricky. Frankly, it's just a matter of what I feel constitutes a boss fight. Obviously, everything with a health bar is a boss. Most of the time, prominent villains will be considered bosses, though it's kinda up in the air which ones I consider. So here's a general rule to live by. If the villain themselves somehow impacts the situation you're in, they'll most likely be a boss. So Mad Hatter in Arkham City impacts the combat section, but Two-Face in Arkham Knight does not. Scarecrow in Asylum actively affects the terrain of his nightmares, but Zsasz in City doesn't impact the terrain of his water treatment plant or whatever it is. The general idea is, can the character be replaced by a basic thug and have nothing change? If yes, they aren't a boss. If not, you get the idea. Regardless, those are the very loose rules I'll be abiding by, and it's my video anyway. Finally, since I want to be fair to all the games, I'm not including any DLC fights on this list. I really wanted to include them, but I don't have all the DLCs, so it wouldn't really be fair. Oh, and don't expect Arkham Origins Blackgate to appear, but nobody played it anyway. To really ensure I got the accurate rankings for this list, I used a program to pit every single boss against one another, and chose my favorite out of the two. Then it determined my list based on the choices, and this is the result. So, tally-ho. Number 40, Deadshot, Arkham City. It's definitely sad to see my favorite game at the bottom of the list, but this is technically a boss, so it had to take last place. You can literally just wait for Deadshot to turn around, then run under him and take him down. Not quite the elite sniper his side missions built him up to be. It's honestly as bad a letdown as Hush in Night. Number 39, Prototype Titan, Arkham Asylum. Yeah, it's a tutorial boss that you can't even lose, but that doesn't mean it can't be critiqued. It's our introduction to Titans in Asylum, and it just keels over and dies without any effort. You can literally just get hit and this thing will have a heart attack before you even die. That's no fun. Number 38, Shiva, Arkham Origins. This is basically just Ra's al Ghul without anything that makes that fight unique. It's just a ninja beatdown with one ninja that has a health bar. Sure, it's a little difficult since ninjas and martial artists are ridiculously difficult to deal with, but that doesn't make it good. Considering Shiva was built up as one of the more dangerous assassins in Origins, and her side mission was honestly pretty good, it's a shame she was relegated to this instead of a Deathstroke-like fight. Number 37, Bird, Arkham Origins. It's no secret Bird is one of the most underwhelming side missions in Origins. He's literally Bane's lieutenant, and his mission is just breaking up street fights over Venom. Then when you actually fight him, it's just another thug beatdown, but with a few Venom thugs thrown in. Not to mention the terrible music playing in the background of this club, by God. Number 36, Titan Joker, Arkham Asylum. I mean, what can I say that hasn't been said? This is a boring, poorly designed boss that boils down to a basic thug beatdown followed by button mashing. I can at least say that Joker's commentary is entertaining enough to keep it from the bottom, and having him throw weapons and explosives onto the field keeps things the littlest bit interesting. That doesn't mean it's good, not by a long shot. Number 35, Deathstroke, Arkham Knight. This is just an objectively worse version of the Cloudburst fight. Considering Slade had such an incredible outing in Origins, we were expecting a lot from him in this game. Instead, you literally sit in one place and spam your weapons on his tank for 30 seconds. His attacks are pitifully easy to dodge, and by this point in the game, you'll probably have max Batmobile health anyway. Number 34, Cloudburst, Arkham Knight. Putting this above Deathstroke is barely a compliment. It's only made ever so slightly better by the fact that you have to do a little hit-and-run strategies to weaken it before actually wailing on it. Having to drive through the roads of Bleak Island while avoiding ridiculous attacks from this tank is kinda fun, but they are pitifully short, and the rest of the fight is a repeat of Deathstroke. At least this one also has the great aesthetic of the City of Fear, so there's that. Number 33, Firefly, Arkham Knight. Just like Slade, Firefly is a shadow of his former self in Night. It's just a casual chase through 3 different islands with Firefly occasionally dropping fire to block your path. Don't get me wrong, I love a good car chase. I'm even one of the few that actually like the APC missions because it tests your driving skill. But when you compare this Firefly to the one in Origins, it's obvious the designers were running out of ideas. I mean, come on, one looks like a badass mercenary while the other looks like a slightly chunkier Freddy Krueger. Number 32, Penguin Titan, Arkham City. I feel like the Titans got a bad rap in City because of their use in Asylum. These fights play out incredibly differently from the OGs, and I really like them. At least when they aren't in really easy combat encounters. The Gladiator Pit is an awesome setting, kinda ruined by the fact that every enemy goes down in one critical strike. And when you have a Titan on hand to bring them all down with a shockwave, yeah, it's not that great. I do like that we're introduced to the fact that Titan is on the streets and that it's a big problem, but it's literally not brought back until Joker's Funhouse at the exact opposite end of the game. They had a good idea making the Titans more like regular enemies, but just didn't use the idea enough. Number 31, Copperhead, Arkham Origins. I honestly don't know why this fight doesn't work for me. Probably for the same reasons as Shiva. It's basically a discount Ra's al Ghul, slightly enhanced by the hallucination scenes that came before. But if you've already done something perfect, why try to do it again? And in the end, it just doesn't make sense. Copperhead's poison is supposed to be slowly killing Batman, yet makes him hallucinate that there are multiple of her? So is he just hitting air while Copperhead sits back and watches? At least with Scarecrow and Asylum, it's explained that all the skeletons you fight are random thugs and titans. And whenever you're fighting Jokers in Night, it's explained that Batman is having some kind of hallucination that completely incapacitates him. Is Copperhead making him go through the same thing even though it's a poison, not a fear toxin? I don't know, but I've just never really liked this fight, so moving on. Number 30, Sewer Titan, Arkham Asylum. The lowest of the Asylum Titans, yet also probably the most difficult. You have basically no space to work with, and thugs are constantly spawning. Though the electric gates help quite a bit. It's pretty fun making the Titans run into gates, or slamming enemies into them while you ride it. And the cramped space adding to the challenge makes this among the better mediocre fights on this list. Number 29, Bane, Arkham Asylum. Honestly, Bane is a pretty alright tutorial boss. For first-timers to the Arkham series, he's really difficult. While it's a bad representation of the character of Bane, it's still a fun enough fight. Having Bane as the only strong boy to take chunks out of the wall and throw at you also makes him pretty unique. The thugs jumping down also make him pretty unique, as he's the only strong boy you can't ride and uses free damage. Number 28, Mr. Hammer and Sickle, Arkham City. For the first two bosses in Arkham City, they don't necessarily set the best precedent. They're really hard for first-timers, though can be cheesed incredibly easily if you spam the Bat Swarm. Using the Wreck Gun to make them attack everyone around them is incredibly fun, especially right at the start of their fights. And their attacks are devastating, especially their jumps. These might be the hardest mini-bosses in the series if you don't know the cheese. Number 27, Double Titans, Arkham Asylum. These guys being our first true introductions to Titans is honestly pretty great. Using them to slap one another to no end is an absolute blast, especially since there are no other enemies for you to worry about. They aren't difficult by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just so much fun making them slap each other to win. Number 26, Arkham Knight Chopper, Arkham Knight. As the first thing you really fight with the Bat Tank, the Chopper isn't really that bad. It's honestly kind of hard, as this thing has a ton of ridiculous attacks for you to dodge, and is sporadically moving about, making it incredibly difficult to hit. Overall, not a terrible start to the tank fights, even if it pretty much was all downhill from here. Number 25, Tiny, Arkham City. I'm still wondering to myself if this counts, but I don't care, I'm putting it on anyway. Tiny's reveal and subsequent beatdown are still two of the best jump scares in these games, and having to carefully tread the ice is a nice callback to Killer Croc. Not to mention, the failure text of needing shark repellent is an amazing callback to the Adam West series. Number 24, Mad Hatter, Arkham City. Honestly, I don't have too much to say here. Hatter's just a middle-of-the-road boss to me. The rabbit hole aesthetic is amazing, and absolutely used to its fullest potential here, despite only existing for like 3 minutes. Hatter himself actually impacts the fight more than you'd think, as if you don't hit him when he appears, he'll actually shock you with some kind of thundercloud, taking big chunks out of your health. So, hit him quick. This is one case of a basic thug beatdown working in the boss's favor, so props to you there, Tetch. Number 23, Killer Croc, Arkham Origins. The perfect tutorial boss. Not too easy, not too hard. It uses pretty much all the important mechanics you've been taught up until this point, and doesn't last too long. Overall, solid B+. Number 22, Albert King, Arkham Knight. Well, it's better than nothing. This is pretty much the only true boss in Arkham Knight that you don't fight with the Batmobile, and it's pretty alright. Albert can only be damaged by dual team takedowns with Robin, meaning you have to build up a combo on the random thugs while Albert constantly revives them and is stupidly powerful against you. His jabs are seriously scary as they do a lot of damage with very little windup. And of course, the actual beatdown portion of this fight is better than others where you just mash attack instead forcing you to counter at certain points. It's pretty good, but certainly nothing to write home about. Number 21, Poison Ivy, Arkham Asylum. I've honestly been giving Ivy too much credit over the years. She only has 2 attacks, one of them is so easily telegraphed it's a joke, and the other is only used when she can be hit. Ivy honestly has way too much health for not gaining new attacks throughout the fight. This isn't like Clayface where you're constantly on your toes to slowly whittle down his health. You're just casually dodging a single attack for 2 minutes before Ivy decides you can damage her. The aesthetic of the fight is top notch, and the addition of thugs in Phase 2 makes things a little better, but this is still a fight I've been praising way too much over the years. Number 20, Guard Titans, Arkham Asylum. The best of the Asylum Titans. I would agree that the Titans had overstayed their welcome by this point, but I also really don't care. It's stupidly fun to ride on the Titans' backs and slap thugs around twice as much as a sewer fight. It's also a little difficult if I'm being honest. There's a lot of crap on screen for you to worry about, and this is Asylum where Batman has the fewest combat options. Regardless of what you think, it's definitely better than Titan Joker. Number 19, Anarchy, Arkham Origins. Another thug beatdown that works in the boss's favor. Anarchy himself isn't that impactful when he actually jumps in, but it's pretty fun when he starts throwing Molotovs on the field during Phase 2. It's a pretty solid end to a pretty solid mission and has some nice social commentary that I am not brave enough to go into. Number 18, Excavator, Arkham Knight. The only good Batmobile fight. This is how you fight something in a tank as Batman. You're in a bunch of cramped tunnels and have to carefully navigate as this nearly indestructible drill is constantly chasing you down. Only when you go down blast tunnels does the drill take damage, and said tunnels are pretty hard to navigate. It's really fun driving this drill into its own demise. Number 17, Joker's Funhouse, Arkham City. Even though this is just another thug beatdown and another beatdown involving Joker, this is much better than the ones before. The biggest part is how much this feels like Joker. He would start a one-on-one against Batman just to raise his confidence, but once he knows he's beat, he calls in his guys. And of his guys, he brings in Mr. Hammer and a Titan. Since Titans are much better in City and Mr. Hammer is completely unique, I just had to love this fight. Plus, let's not forget the environment. The funhouse aspect is on full display here, with thugs dropping in from train cars and speeding bumper cars potentially running you over. The cars in particular make me love this fight a lot more, as you must keep them in mind while fighting the many enemies. Also, using the retcon on Abramovich to have him swing his hammer is great. It's a great use of City's unique elements and the best way to fight Joker in these games. Number 16, Man-Bat, Arkham Knight. This encounter is slightly lower than before, and I'm guessing just because of this later discovered simplicity of this fight. All you're doing is listening for Man-Bat's screeches in the night, then grappling up high and gliding to him. It's really simple, especially since you don't have to do anything after bringing him to the ground. What elevates this encounter, however, was my experience doing this mission, No Glide. This was a genuinely fun challenge to figure out during the No Glide run, and one of the few things I liked during the night portion of that challenge. I highly recommend everyone try that out because it is way more fun than it deserves to be. Number 15, Mad Hatter, Arkham Origins. This is just a discount Scarecrow encounter, but it was given lots of love and care unlike the other discount fights. The Wonderland scenery is top-notch, and Tetch narrating Batman through the whole thing is a nice touch. There's a lot of fun moments Scarecrow didn't have, like the maze doors and that incredible mirrors section. Oh, and let's not forget the incredible camera this section has, wobbling all over the place, giving you a very disorienting feeling. It all comes together very well in a nice homage to Scarecrow. Number 14, The Riddler, Arkham Knight. While I would have preferred a Mr. Freeze-like fight for the so-called smartest man in the room, I honestly really like what we got. This takes all the robot beatdowns we've been doing the whole game and compounds them with a giant Riddler-driven mech. Having to constantly swap between Batman and Catwoman to take down these bots is really unique, and having Riddler constantly shooting lasers and slams your way is great at keeping you on your toes. It also gives a legitimate reason for having to destroy all the minions before hitting the big bad, as Riddler doesn't become vulnerable until he tries to get the robots up and running again. It's overall a great concept for a fight that I'd say works pretty well. Number 13, Firefly, Arkham Origins. Sorry to all you Firefly fans, but this boss is not as complex as you think it is. It's literally the same concept as Poison Ivy before, spamming batarangs to slowly whittle down a monstrous amount of health. The only time you use other gadgets is when the boss is literally stunned and unable to do anything, and all they do is trigger slightly different events to occur. The glue grenades just forcing you to spam more batarangs, and the backclaw just progressing phases. Now, with that said, it is still much better than Ivy for a number of reasons. Firstly, the boss doesn't just dawdle around with the same 2 attacks for 5 minutes, as Firefly has a pretty large variety of attacks. Secondly, the scenery and music is amazing. The Burning Bridge is an awesome set piece for this boss, and Firefly's theme is literally the longest in the series at over 6 minutes long. You know they knew they had something special. And lastly is the general interactivity. There's a lot more going on than just fighting the boss. The bridge collapses, so Batman has to start running to avoid Firefly's attacks. The halfway point, and the finale of Batman hanging from Firefly as he mindlessly flies around, is awesome. Number 12, Professor Pig, Arkham Knight. The ideal horde boss fight. Pig and the Dollatrons provide a very unique challenge that I absolutely love. The Dollatrons are immune to pain, meaning they have to be subject to a takedown but to be knocked out. That's already a unique concept, as you're probably used to other enemies going down after enough hits. In this case, you have to actively build a combo to perform takedowns and avoid the cleavers that Pig will end up throwing at you. It's another geniusly designed fight that honestly tends to get overlooked. It's pretty difficult even if the Dollatrons aren't the most combat-ready enemies you can face. And let's not forget, it's creepy as heck and the music is awesome. Number 11, Solomon Grundy, Arkham City. I've said many times and I'll say it again. The main bosses that everyone thinks about in Arkham City are good at worst and amazing at best. Case in point is Solomon Grundy. It's a pretty easy boss even for first-timers, but that doesn't detract from how unique it is. This is the only fight in the series where you use the quickfire explosive gel, and it actually requires a lot of skill to use. However, what made me put this fight much higher than you'd probably expect was my no quickfire run. Beating Solomon Grundy without using the quickfire explosive gel was incredibly fun, stupidly difficult, and a challenge I recommend everyone undertake. It gave me a new appreciation for the fight that speedrunning had since taken away. Grundy has some pretty difficult to dodge attacks that you probably would never see if you even slightly know what you're doing. But that challenge run gave me a great appreciation of the fight I'd never have otherwise. Number 10, Johnny Charisma, Arkham Knight. Okay, this one may be my one cheat on the list. Johnny might be able to be replaced with a basic thug, but I couldn't resist giving this fight the attention it wholeheartedly deserves. The fight itself is pretty lame, but the fact that we got Mark Hamill singing the most incredible song as Joker gives this fight more points than it probably deserves. Mark is not holding back with this song, which has the perfect combination of absolutely terrible and hilarious lyrics. Yes, defusing the bombs as Robin is pretty boring, though avoiding Charisma's line of sight can be difficult at times. And just the fact that this is exactly what got Mark on board to play Joker for this game more than earns it a high spot on this list. Number 9, Jason Todd, Arkham Knight. It's surprising to see a game with basically no bosses have one of the best, and Jason is no pushover. He's basically Deadshot, but better. He takes a position on one of the gargoyles and has eyes across a whole section of the room that he's in, meaning you have to get under him to land a hit. This means using all of your gadgets and Predator knowledge to take out the militia and sneak underneath Jason's perch. And with how adaptive Predator thugs are, this fight gets pretty insane. Jason isn't really the main threat here, he's just a small final challenge for you to overcome to progress through the phases. The thugs are the real stars of the show as they slowly adapt to Batman's methods. They bring in drones, optic deflection armor, and learn from their comrades' mistakes. It all comes together to make a fantastic fight after a not-so-fantastic reveal. Number 8, Clayface, Arkham City. Considering the 2 bosses preceding it, this fight could be seen as a bit of a letdown, and I understand that reasoning. That doesn't mean the fight itself isn't awesome. Clayface was a great twist reveal, and the fight itself is really fun. As I mentioned back with Ivy, this is spamming done right. You are just constantly spamming freeze nades, but you're also constantly avoiding Clayface's many unique attacks. Sure, most of them can be avoided with a single dodge roll, but what else is new? Let's not forget the high damage dealers of the explosives in each corner of the room, allowing you to get creative with Clayface's attacks to damage him even more. Oh, and need I mention getting to use Talia's sword for the final phase to cut down a bunch of Claymen? This fight just keeps the fun coming and is exactly why it's a great final boss. Number 7, Deadshot, Arkham Origins. The de facto Deadshot fight. Unlike his pitiful outing in City, Deadshot actually puts up a fight here. Rather than being hyper-focused on a single direction, Deadshot has eyes on the entire room. He can bounce his laser sight off any reflective surface to get a view of any thug in the room, meaning you need to take them out quickly and quietly. And Deadshot isn't a pushover either. He takes a lot of hits to take down, meaning the fight just lasts that much longer. I do wish there was more of a build up to this fight along the lines of the missions in City, but the crime scene investigation is far from the worst. And it's a great fight that I only wish was part of the main story. Number 6, Killer Croc, Arkham Asylum. I will stand by my statement that Croc's lair is one of the scariest locations in gaming, and on hard mode, it is absolutely terrifying. Croc never gives you a chance to breathe, constantly popping up or breaking the planks below you. You have very little room for error or rest, as Croc will no longer warn you before popping up, and will constantly break planks seemingly at random. And let's not forget that the only thing between you and a watery grave are some batarangs which can miss, and the occasional line launch. Meanwhile, you have to slowly navigate this maze of a sewer to collect 5 plant spores, then track back a ridiculous 500 meters to escape. Combine that with Croc occasionally popping up right in your face, and you'll be on your toes the entire fight. It's intense, it's scary as hell, and by God is it fun. Number 5, Deathstroke, Arkham Origins. The true Deathstroke battle. This is the hardest fight in the franchise, don't at me. This fight is 2 combat experts giving it their all in a full-on cinematic brawl. Deathstroke holds nothing back as you hopelessly try to land a combo on him. His attacks require expert understanding of the counter timing, and pressing it too early results in a lot of damage. And it only gets more and more difficult as the fight progresses, with you having to counter up to 3 times in a single string, all with varying times. Combine that with the fact that he does more damage in Phase 3, and you have a ridiculous fight that is absolutely unforgettable. And all of Slade's different attacks make the fight that much more memorable. He doesn't just do a single sword swipe the entire time, but instead leaps up and tries to hit you with explosive barrels, then shoot you while you're distracted. It's a ton of fun always being on your toes for a counter, and never really getting the chance to get good damage in until you move to the next phase. Number 4, Scarecrow, Arkham Asylum. I've been building it up for a while now, and here he is. Scarecrow and Asylum are some of the best encounters in video game history. There is no competition. It's one thing that these sections are fun little platforming diversions mixed with hide and seek, but they also provide ingenious storytelling and non-gameplay design. The first section provides a great scare with incredible buildup of Gordon dying and seeing the corpse of Bruce's parents. The second section gives a great artistic interpretation of the Waynes getting shot and is also pretty scary. But the third section is nothing short of a masterpiece. It simultaneously taps into Batman's fears as well as the players. The crash is one of the best scares in video game history because it's something that could be real. Animatronics or long men in suits jumping the player are unrealistic and unrelatable. Your game crashing and literally dragging you back to the beginning is a genuine fear many gamers have that this game perfectly exploits. And it doesn't stop there, as the sequence where everyone's roles are swapped taps into Batman's fear of being in the same position as Joker. Then it hits yours and Batman's fears when Joker shoots you, making Batman think he's died, and the player think they failed a QuickTime event. It's genius on so many levels that I will never be able to truly do it justice. Number 3, Ra's al Ghul, Arkham City. I may have given this number 2 a long while ago, but 3 is certainly nothing to scoff at. This is everything Shiva tried to be. It's an epic scale battle that's both moderately difficult and incredibly fun. Ra's clones are difficult to deal with, seeing as they're ninjas, but they also go down in one combo hit, so it doesn't feel as tedious as Shiva. Of course, that's only half of the battle, as the second half is even better. Ra's giant sand statue is awesome to go against, as it has a lot of difficult to dodge attacks. All the while, you have to damage Ra's. And since you only have a literal small window to do so, this fight just becomes more chaotic. Whereas Deathstroke was a perfect reflection of one-on-one combat, this is a perfect reflection of Arkham combat. Batman having to juggle multiple enemies at once, always being ready for multiple counters, and using his gadgets to the best of his abilities to wear his foes down. It all creates an incredible fight that no other game has even come close to replicating, and I think it all comes down to the statue phase. No other game has tried anything like the Ra's statue, and it shows. I guess it was just too perfect. Number 2, Bane, Arkham Origins. I totally snubbed Bane in my first list on the subject. His fights in Origins are easily the best combat outings in the series. Deathstroke may take more skill, but Bane is simply better as a whole, especially considering he has multiple outings, each with unique fighting styles. Bane on the hotel roof is probably my favorite, mostly because of how personal it feels. The beginning actually feels a lot like Deathstroke with two combat experts in an empty room, but then of course, Bane pulls out the Venom. This adds a whole new level of difficulty as you must land a combo takedown to disable it, or else Bane is literally invincible. This is carried onto the balcony where he now charges like his classic Asylum fight, except it's much harder to avoid because Bane will basically track you until the last second. Bane is also much tougher than normal buff enemies because he doesn't even stumble when you try to super stun him, making him that much harder to beat. And TN1 Bane is a different story entirely. This is basically Mr. Freeze without as much adapting. It's the only other stealth boss in the series that doesn't act like a regular Predator encounter, and that just makes it all the more fantastic. Despite being a hulking monster at this point, Bane is still calculating and deceiving. He learns your tricks and destroys grates in an attempt to find you, and you must attack him by surprise to win. Not to mention that the music is absolutely perfect. It's honestly a nearly perfect set of bosses that could only be beaten out by literal perfection. Number 1, Mr. Freeze, Arkham City. Was there any doubt? This is my favorite boss of all time. It is literally a perfect boss no matter how you slice it. If Mr. Freeze sees Batman, he will kill him, so Batman must stay out of sight and attack Freeze by surprise. Unfortunately for Batman, Mr. Freeze learns from his mistakes and will perfectly adapt to every attack you use, meaning you must use every ability in your arsenal to take Freeze down, some of which will be incredibly convoluted, like using the line launcher or doing a reverse ledge takedown. It becomes incredibly difficult, especially if you can't figure out what that last attack you need is, but that just adds to the enjoyment. Batman would struggle to find ways to damage Freeze, and that translates perfectly into gameplay. Now, these factors alone make a pretty good boss, but what makes it somehow even better is how smart Mr. Freeze is. Under normal circumstances, bosses where you have to use stealth are very easily manipulated. You can either get them walking in a loop if they track you, or hide someplace where they'll simply never find you. And they probably can't hit you if you just start running and even slightly break their line of sight. Mr. Freeze, however, is better than that. He will constantly track you by following the heat left behind by Batman's footsteps. However, after realizing he won't find you, he releases tracking drones. These will home in on you, immediately giving your exact location to Freeze. Now this wouldn't be so bad, but Freeze is still smarter than that. He shoots an ice bomb in the general area the Seekers landed, potentially hitting you before he even gets there. And that still isn't all. If Freeze sees you but doesn't have enough time to shoot you before you get away, he'll also shoot an ice bomb at you. However, this shot doesn't go where you are, but where he thinks you'll be. Freeze can sometimes predict your movements and will shoot the ice bomb where you run to get free damage off. Then he'll go to your last known location and start tracking you down again. But you know, none of this is really that bad since you have detective mode. Guess what? Freeze restricts your one saving grace. If you use detective mode for too long, Freeze will track and jam it, making it unusable for the rest of the fight, meaning you can only periodically use it to get glimpses of what's going on. All of this combines to make one of the most difficult and most incredibly satisfying bosses of all time. Mr. Freeze should be the prime example of how to do a boss fight, not just for the Arkham saga, but for video games in general. Holy heck, that was a long video. The script alone was over 12 pages long, and I do not want to go through that recording process again. Just for fun, let's average out the scores for each of the games to see who had the best bosses mathematically compared to the rest. Each bot will get their number ranking flipped worth of points, and will then divide that by the number of bosses per game. With a score of 17.44, we have Arkham Asylum in last place. It's unfortunate that the fantastic Killer Croc and Scarecrow were dragged down by the overwhelming slew of Titans, but that's the way it is. In third, with a score of 20.18, we have Arkham Knight. The good really helped Knight in this case. Take out Jason Todd or Professor Pig, and these rankings could easily be swapped. In second, with a score of 22 flat, we have Arkham Origins. Not much to say here, just a very great selection of bosses. And trailing 0.1 points ahead, at 22.1, is Arkham City in first place. To no one's surprise, I hope, it's my favorite game of all time for a reason. And that will finally do it for this video, chaps. I hope you enjoyed. If so, leave a comment with your personal ranking because I guarantee it will be different than mine. Next ranking video will be the games themselves, but don't hold your breath on that one. I still gotta get footage and finish the script, which is already over 20 pages long. Yeah, be patient on that one. In the meantime, like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later, chaps.